It's my pleasure to introduce our super session this morning. The session is going to be designing a better trust building playbook. There is a saying that trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. During this session, Emily Lagrada and Mankinta Holloway will work us through implementing concrete examples, measurable strategies to build trust over time, and they will design thinking to us the structure of outcome solutions and assist in building habits that will continue our improvements. Please join me now in welcoming Emily and Mankinta.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Raise your hand if you did karaoke last night. Nice.
Raise your hand if you did a lot of dancing last night.
Okay. All right, there won't be much of either of those things in the next hour and 15 minutes, but we'll have some other kinds of more conference ballroom appropriate fun. It's really a pleasure to be up here with my friend Mankinta. We've known each other a dozen or so years.
Yes.
As a quick introduction, my name is Emily Lagrada. I'm a lawyer by training, but haven't practiced in many years. I started out in the Manhattan Criminal Court, where I got a fast and furious dose of what busy court operations look like and feel like for both the professionals and my clients. But I've spent the past 15 years working in this sort of research to policy translation space. So I like to say I grew up at the Center for Court Innovation, where I found the topic of procedural justice. And for the past 6 years, I've run my own consulting shop that focuses almost exclusively on this topic. So I live it and breathe it professionally, and I'm so thrilled to get to continue the conversation about this topic with all of you here. So I'll let Mankinta introduce himself, and then we'll kick off here.
Yeah, my name is Mankinta Holloway. I had a lot of trust that they would get my name right, so woohoo, awesome. And I often tell people I'm not a girl, but my name is Mankinta Holloway, yes, and I come from Oklahoma City by way of Alabama. I started my career there. I'm born and raised in the South, and so being in Oklahoma City has been a great change for me. I've only been there for 4 months. And a lot of transition. Daughter's graduated, wife is trying to move, all those things. But I got into this work straight out of college. I worked in the Department of Corrections in Georgia, did a lot of that work, and then I moved on to work with children that are at risk and doing some wraparound services, got into probation, and then fell in love with courts and been there ever since. And so I have been a proponent of this work with Emily, met her back in 2013, 2015-ish. And so we've been friends and connected ever since. And so when she asked me to come here, when I was in Birmingham, I was excited and elated for an opportunity to share with you some of the things that I've learned over the years. And so looking forward to what we can do to help you get better.
Great, thanks, Mankinta. So let's start. I wanted to just start by grounding this in things that you care about already, right? I'm sensitive to the fact that you all are likely constantly asked to do more with less, including the sort of newfangled flavor of the week, whatever it may be. But this is not new. I think this is something that you care about deeply already, even if you maybe haven't labeled it as such. So given that some of us maybe danced or sung too much last night, this is going to involve a very slight amount of physical movement, not much. So the first thing we're going to require physical movement is if you are sitting at a table that does not have a bunch of colorful sheets of paper on it, you're going to need to get up and move towards a table with colorful sheets of paper. And yes, that's going to a little bit inconvenience the people that chose to sit in the very back row. So this is just going to allow you to participate in an activity or some activities that we have during the session. So if you want to participate, come forward. The other request is if you have found yourself sitting, if you're the only person at a table, I'd also invite you to get up and move to a table that has at least one other person. We can do this.
And we're asking you to trust us.
Trust us. Yes, trust us. And if you don't want to, that's fine. No one is policing these requests, so you do you, and that's fine. But hopefully there will be some mild rewards for this. And thank you, brave people, for coming up front. Okay, I see folks getting settled. So go ahead and grab one of those colorful sheets of paper. They're a mix of colors because I bought rainbow packs of paper, but otherwise they all have the same content. So don't feel like you're drawing the short straw by picking the only yellow one or something. So go ahead and grab one of those and get them in front of you.
And if your favorite color is not on the table, we're sorry.
And go ahead and turn it to the side that has 3 numbered items. So 1, 2, and 3. We're going to start with that side. And thank you for indulging me. I know this is a paperless conference, but there's actually very solid research that when we write things down with a pen, as opposed to clicking away with our thumbs on our phones or even typing, when we write things down with a pen, we are helping our brain incorporate that information. So I killed a couple of trees to support you all in your learning with this. So forgive me on that. I am a proponent of protecting our environment, but in this way I had a weighing of values that cut towards supporting you all. Okay, so for our first exercise, this is just on your own. So take a moment, and I want you to write down in that first number 1 question, write down 3 words that you really hope the public would use to describe your court.
Ooh.
So if court is going as well as you think it should be, right? Like, how do we want the public to describe the court in a word? But you get 3 choices, right? So you can come up with 3, it's probably an adjective, a describing word, 3 things that you hope the public would choose to describe your court. So I'll give a moment of quiet as you do that. And again, don't keep it in your head. Go ahead and write it down. You're giving your brain a chance to process this a little bit more deeply. No cheating. It has to be your own answer. No neighbor work quite yet.
We need that Jeopardy music playing.
Yes, right?
That'd be nice.
I know. Next time. All right, so now I'm going to see if I can guess the power of my mind, some of the things that maybe showed up on your list. So go ahead and stand up if I call out something that you wrote down. Okay, so stand up if you put the word fair. Oh, that's so satisfying. Stand up if you, stay standing. Stand up if you put the word helpful. You can stay standing if you were already fair or helpful. Okay, stand up if you put transparent.
That's a few people.
Keep standing, yeah. Stand up if you put impartial. Stand up if you put respectful.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, you can go ahead and sit down. So notice that the vast majority of you collectively named the dimensions of procedural justice.
Yes.
Which is what we're going to be talking about today. And so why I love asking some version of that question, and I do it almost every single time I talk with groups of folks like you all, whether it's in a jail, talking to COs, whether it's a room full of prosecutors, whether it's a room full of judges, without fail, the number 1 answer to that question is always fair. And so I'm showing just some examples of word clouds when we've done this kind of live polling. So again, the point is to say that we know you already care about being seen as fair and actually being fair, right? Those are core dimensions of the work that we do. And this is part of the science behind that. So this is not some additional thing that we're asking you all to care about, but rather something that's already deeply important. All right, so we've got 4 takeaways that we're going to cover today, and then we're going to do a little bit of work with one another to brainstorm ideas and then actually send you off with some concrete, small but tangible items that you could maybe take back to the office when you return from Omaha. Maykinta is going to kick us off with the first.
So I have this unique task from Emily to talk about like how this looks and making an effort. And so one of our takeaways is creating this thing of our why being fair, right? If my why is fair, a lot of people stood up when we talked about fairness. If that's my why, what do I need to do to make that a reality? Because I can say something that I want, but it requires me to do something to make it tangible. And so for me, the work that I've been allowed to do with so many great people is turn those things into reality. And so one of the things that I've learned over the course of years is when my why makes sense, my what has to connect to it. And so why never changes. Because if you look at why you started doing the work, being fair and impartial has always been a part of your career. But as we journey into these new things, and as the young lady was speaking a minute ago, is the evolution of course has always moved. And so the what is the process. And so one of the things in looking at justice, I try to compare it to is we're like a hospital. And so there's a variation of people who have to come to the court, like they have to go to the hospital, but where do they fit in the organization of the hospital or in the court? Some people only come in and they just go and they get what they need and they leave right back out of the door, right? Some people have to transition to other layers and other levels, and we have to be mindful how we transition them. And so over the course of time in my profession, this thing called fairness and how do we create this space is, as a leader, how do I model it? And the way that we've learned to do that over the course of time is teach, model, and coach. That's the principle. And so if I teach you the why, right, and then I coach you on that next part of what to do and how to grow, and I model that in how I live and how I respond to you, it transitions into how we engage the public. And so that's one of the key things that we want to make sure that we do. And one of the things that I've learned in my transition from Birmingham to Oklahoma is I'm the only Alabama fan in the city. But I believe that I can build some trust and I can convert some people to be Bama fans. But what I've also learned in that space is there's a major difference in language and how you move. And the words that I use in Alabama don't fit in spaces that I operate in now. And so the key to now getting this new team to embrace some of the things that I've learned is to start by listening. If I want you to be fair to me, I got to be fair to you and understand that you don't understand how I talk and I don't understand how you talk. And we have learned to just listen. I don't judge. I don't create space that I don't understand. And so my why is, why did we do it that way, right? And give them grace and space to explain to me that. And then we unpack that. And then we always go back to what we were trying to do, which is be fair. Are the things we're doing now getting us to fairness? And so I've learned that in the space. And so it's been an ongoing process in this last 4 months, and changing words to help change culture has been one of the most important things that I've done. I was sharing with the table yesterday over in the lobby at the hotel, words that I try not to get out of my vocabulary. I'm trying to move past this one word. It's a C word, and it's called change. When people hear that word, they automatically think that you're taking something from them. It's like a scary thing. Even though we know it happens, when you hear it, it's almost like, oh my God, what am I losing? And so I replaced that word with better. How do we get better? I don't want your best, because when people say, I gave you my best, that means I don't have anything else to give you. But if I say, okay, I appreciate you giving me your best, but let's evaluate how do we become better. And it always causes people to think about what they did, how impactful it was, and what can we do to progressively move in a different direction. The next word that I try to get out of my vocabulary, and it's helped me, is this word meeting. Meeting is a lectorial conversation that people think that you're just gonna come in and tell me what to do. So I always say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion. It's all inclusive. It allows us to talk back and forth. I'm looking forward to what you have to say. And the next thing, the next word is, I don't like the word staff. And I've seen it in so much stuff that we've talked about since I've been here. And I like the word team, right? Team is an all-inclusive word that says every one of us brings different skill sets to the table. And I want to make sure that I maximize every aspect of what you bring so we can all be successful. Because if we win, we all celebrate. If we lose, we all lose together. And so that's some things that I've learned in this profession. Yeah.
Thanks, Van Kinta.
Yeah.
Okay, so takeaway number one, if fairness is your why, we want to sort of build in then that question of what we are doing, and it can be very granular, right? How are the agenda topics on today's conversation? How could they, or how are they advancing our goal of fairness? And so what's going to help us with that is that there is actually hard science behind how you generate fairness. And I know that you heard from another colleague and friend of mine yesterday, Caroline Nobo from the Yale Justice Collaboratory, yes, who laid out that science. We're not gonna go through much of that again, but as a review or for folks who missed it, there are 50 years worth of social science information, survey data, interviews, whatnot, large-scale studies, and really every dimension of the legal system that you could imagine that support this framework that we're using today. So while trust building or fairness might feel like these words that we throw around that are very elusive, right? They might be a common goal, but like, how do we do it? There really is a clear formula for how we do it. And I put up this rocket ship image to remind us, and in fact, Caroline taught me this phrase, that it's not rocket science, but it is science. So if it was easy, we'd probably all be doing it already, and we wouldn't need a whole conference focused on promoting trust and confidence. So it's not easy, but it is simple. There is something simple and straightforward about this. We just need some diligence and a plan to actually enact it. The other thing I just don't want to go without saying is that often when we talk about fairness, and I think this is maybe especially true of us lawyers, but when we talk about fairness, it's very easy to equate that with just the result, right? The outcome of whatever happened with a particular case. And fairness is actually much more complex, and that's very good news for all of us working in a space where we don't have control over the outcome. In fact, there are very few people, right? Even judges don't necessarily have control over the outcome of a case. There are limitations on that. And that's the procedure part of procedural justice or procedural fairness. Those are interchangeable terms. That's the procedure part, that how people are experiencing the process is a really influential part of fairness. And so to sort of just challenge the myth, if it were true that people would think the court is fair when they win, and they would say that the court is unfair when they lose, then think about some of the dockets in your courthouse, right? Think about a criminal arraignments docket. What percentage of people coming through would say that the court is fair if they needed to win their case or have a good outcome in that appearance? It'd be pretty low, right? Or think about family court. It's not really clear who the winners are in family court sometimes, right? And so we would expect these like single-digit levels of, approval ratings or perceptions of fairness coming out of those dockets if fairness was simply about, ooh, I won my case or I had a favorable outcome. But it's really much more complex about that. And again, Thankfully, there are these other components that you all have direct control over. So I wanted to present a slightly different metaphor. Does anybody bake? Are there any bakers in the audience? I like eating baked goods, but I'm terrible at actually doing it. I think because there's too much specificity in the science. I'm sort of more of one of those like a little bit of this, a little bit of that kind of cooks. But as a different sort of metaphor for this, if you didn't know anything about baking and you looked at the ingredients of eggs, butter, flour, right? And then someone told you that you could magically transform it into this soft, moist, delicious cupcake, you might not believe them, right? But those ingredients really do matter, right? Someone has perfected that. It's really a pretty simple list of like 4 ingredients. Yeah. And if you follow the right steps, you're gonna generate the delicious cupcake. It's kind of like that, right? That there may be something intuitive if you're familiar with it, but if you miss an ingredient, it's really not gonna taste very good. It might taste all right, it might be a little flat, you're gonna miss out. So this is my reminder that we really need to hit all 4 elements. So we can't just kind of shorthand like, oh, we'll be respectful to people, and that's what procedural justice is about. Or we'll make sure we give them a voice. That's important also, but as part of our workshop today, I want to make sure that we're finding ways that we hit all 4 ingredients, so we don't have the sort of flat cupcakes or the ones that don't have enough sugar. So my last little effort to help us focus on the elements is to give you a memory aid, and it's very silly, but I find that silly memory aids are sometimes more effective than not. So I was once talking about procedural justice to a group of law librarians, and one of them offered this, I think, brilliant mnemonic memory aid to remember the 4 elements of procedural justice. So if you look at respect, voice, neutrality, understanding, there is not a good acronym. VERN is the best I've come up with, and it doesn't really have a very good ring. But what this law librarian offered me is that if you take the first letter of each of the elements, you can get robots vacuum, not unicorns. And AI helped me to create an image to match that. So find a way, whether it's through this image or Vern or something else, to keep these 4 elements top of mind. And don't let our sort of tendency to feel like, yeah, like philosophically I'm on board with promoting fairness or promoting trust. We gotta keep the science part of it. Have those 4 elements top of mind. And again, we're gonna get hands-on with that in just a moment.
Yep. So one of the things that we need to understand too is as we attempt to build this relationship with the public, we have to first have a relationship with each other. And so what I've learned in my 20 plus years of doing the work is that sometimes we can get so outward focused that we forget about the inside. And Emily and I was talking about this earlier about sleep and rest. And it was unique, and it kind of ties into this thing. And what I've learned in talking to team members is it's always a question like my daughter always asks, well, what about me? Like you want me to do this work, but what about me? Have you considered paying me more because you're giving me more work? Have you considered my mental health because these people come in with all these problems? What about me? And so one of the things that we've done in Oklahoma City since I've been there, if we started with one-on-one sessions. So my first week before I did anything in the department, I met with every single team member for 15 to 20 minutes. And I just let some of them just throw up on the table. And I was like, oh my God, I need another degree for this. But it was so helpful because from what some of them told me, they had never been into the court administrator's office. Just think about that. My office is on the 3rd floor. I'm so far removed from all the processes. I have to be intentional about getting up and going downstairs. And so what I learned in that space is before I can ever send you out to do anything, right, I need to show you what the expectations are. I need to teach you our why, right? I need to model the what, and then I need to coach your growth. And so when I do those three things, it changes the dynamic of how we do business. And so what I've learned in the space since I've been there for the last 4 months, I'm building credibility. Don't nobody care how many degrees I have. Don't nobody care how many times I speak somewhere. I don't know you. Just like people come into the building, I don't know you. And you're asking me to share my life with you, do what with it? Just think about that. Because if people are fearful when they come into the building, they're also apprehensive about what they share. And if team members don't feel like you care about not just the work, but them as a person, I want to know about your children. I want to know about your family. I want to know about your dreams. I want to know about your goals. Because sometimes people took the job because there was nothing else to take. Just think about that. And they spent the last 20 years doing something that they really didn't want to do, serving people they really never intended to serve. And sometimes we can compound that by continuing to do those things that create other issues. But in this journey, what I've learned is we can become so tech savvy that we leave people behind. And as a leader, I use a military terminology. There's sometimes when I'm leading the run in the morning, sometimes I'm in the front, right? But there's sometimes I got to get beside them because I'm encouraging every level in every space. But there are times where I got to be behind them, pushing them forward, dealing with those people who are straggling behind, because everybody on the team matters. That's why I like the concept of team. There are times where I got to teach you how to cheer from the bench. I have to model that. I have to model when I don't get my name called and get recognized. You got to see me not get offended. And we got to talk through that. And I got to ask you, how did that make you feel when you didn't get the job? When you don't get the promotion? What's my conversation with you? And so as I do those things, I've learned that it transitions out to the public. And they then start modeling that. I'm at the door greeting people as they come in the building. Hey, welcome to Oklahoma Mental Support. How can we serve you, right? Because we're here for service. It's not work, it's service. And we chose to do this service, right? And so when we do those things, I think it's translated over the course of my time into some great spaces. And because Birmingham, and I'm trying to get that other word, Birmingham, out of my vocabulary and Oklahoma City, because nobody want to know about the things that I did in Birmingham. They really don't care. But when you see people in spaces start calling your name and you don't ask them to, you start building respect in spaces. And so what I've learned and what I've done over the last 4 months has been fun. I've learned the people. I've learned the work. I've sat in the divisions because I want to hear their voice, because what they see is something greater than what I see. I always tell people academia is great for theory, but when you get out there and somebody cuss you out for the first time, this practice. And this is real life. It's real life. Mike Tyson said, everybody got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's life. And so when people come in, these people come into the building and they're hurt and they're trying to get something resolved, and they don't know anything other than what their uncle, what their auntie, what their mama told them about court or what they saw on TV. And so I've learned that we got to be mindful of how we engage people, and we do that through teach, model, and coaching.
Awesome. So it's, on the one hand, it sort of doubles it, right? We're doing this internally and externally, but I think it's actually closer to a 2-for-1, right?
Yes.
That sort of modeling and coaching is reinforcing of both sides, right? It's promoting this with your team as well as advancing the external work.
Yep.
So our last takeaway, and I'm sure Caroline talked about this yesterday, these kind of one last perk, right? So we want to advance, we want to invest in these elements because they generate public trust and perceptions of fairness, right? I think we established that's probably is its own goal. But I will never forget in my very first project, pilot effort, back in 2009, I was pretty new at the Center for Court Innovation, and I was gifted this federally funded project where we were going to go see if we could teach procedural justice to some judges. And they said, go find a court that'll work with you. So I had a list of, courts we'd worked with before, and nobody really wanted to do it. But one took my call, and so I said, congratulations, you're selected. And we were having our first planning meeting. We had Tom Tyler, who's, the godfather of this topic himself. He helped found the research center that Caroline is the director of. I remember him saying in one of those early planning meetings, he said, trust and fairness really are their own goal, right? The legitimacy of our system can be the primary prize. He said, but I'm not too embarrassed to say, do it because it makes people more cooperative, right? There's this sort of secondary and really helpful benefit that, again, has played out in countless studies. I've highlighted this is, I think, the only chart we're going to show you. But one of the seminal studies that Tom Tyler did in the California courts that looked at the relationship between perceptions of procedural fairness, did you feel like the process and treatment were fair, looked at the connection between that and decision acceptance. And that doesn't have to just be accepting the court decision. It could be cooperating with your cashier. It could be complying with what court security asks them when they're coming in the building. All of these tiny opportunities to improve how cooperative people are with whatever it is you and your teammates are asking them to do, that's a pretty big win, right? That's tied directly to the efficacy of everything else you're trying to do. If people are sort of more willing to, go along with you on those acts. So that sort of is our last main selling point. Okay, so let's get back to these worksheets. We're going to have you do a little bit more work. So for this one, you're going to need a partner. So hopefully everybody, if you don't have someone at your table, I invite you to stand up and find a table with at least one other person. So turn to your neighbor, ideally in pairs. Don't make the groups too big. Find a buddy.
I love the engagement.
I know. You guys don't even know what you're doing yet. No, you do. Okay, it's right on the worksheet. So you have 2 questions that we want you to answer. So the first question, thank you, whoever was whistling.
I know.
The first question is, think about that compliance and cooperation benefit. How would it make your job easier if people were a little more compliant and cooperative? Just fantasize for a minute, right? What would go more smoothly in your day? You might think about a typical work day. You might think about a specific pain point. What might that look like if people were a little more cooperative and compliant? And that could be internal, right? That could be with your own teammates.
Yeah.
Or it could be interacting with members of the public. Both apply. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, I want you to think about how your court measures success. And that could be in an official capacity, what city council asks of you at the end of each year, or whatnot. Or it could be internal measures. But think about how you measure success. How might some of those efforts then show up in your performance measures? If people were a little more cooperative and a little more compliant with what you're doing, what performance measures might get activated or enhanced with that added cooperation? So we're only going to give you a few minutes, so do quick work with your partner and physically write down what you're coming up with, at least your own answers or as a team. All right? If you have any questions, raise your hand and we can come assist.
I do wish we had the Jeopardy music. That would be so cool. The Jeopardy music would be so cool.
We're a tiny bit behind, but not bad.
Cool.
or like an athlete, and you're like,
When I was thinking that I can do a selfie where all those people behind us feel
my wife will love that. She's like, take pictures. I'm like, how can I do that from
so
the
awkward, but whatever. Maybe at the end.
well, I don't like left turn myself off. So
All right, I know that wasn't enough time to fully flesh out how this is going to change your world, but let's come back together and move forward. This is all just sort of practice. It's building muscle memory. How do we attach these ideas to things we already care about, right? What is sort of the intrinsic motivation? So if we want to think about behavior change, right? If we want a different output, we got to give a different input. So if the different input is going to be, oh wait, no, I can't say behavior change in front of Mankinta. Behavior betterment. If we're going to achieve better behavior, if we want a different output, we need a different input. So motivation is a really key part of that, but it's not the only part of that, right? And anyone who's ever, attempted a new exercise plan in January knows that motivation alone won't do it. We need some other things, right? You need a game plan with some specific practices. You need reminders, right? Something that's sort of built into your daily life, so you're going to remember to do this. And ideally, you need some sort of reward, because we are, alas, we are all motivated by sort of some reward as well. So we're going to think about each of these components, but certainly things that point towards your performance measures are another type of intrinsic motivation or intrinsic reward that we might think about, and I encourage you to continue those conversations back home. So for the remainder of our session, we have sort of a mission. We have all been to conferences where best case scenario, maybe, you sit, you feel kind of inspired. Oh, that'd be so neat if we could get everybody on board with that. And then, you go out for karaoke, you fly home, and Monday morning rolls around, and you're probably doing the exact same thing you did the prior, 2 weeks ago Monday. That is also human nature, right? We are creatures of habit. So to build a new habit, we need to start making at least micro adjustments. Micro adjustments are way easier than macro adjustments. And so it's perfectly fine to start really small. And of course, nobody's starting at zero on this. You already care about this. So we're looking for really just micro enhancements. So we want to identify small but meaningful enhancements that are tied to this theory, right? We don't have to make it up. There's a lot of information from the field that has already contributed to how this can play out. And then we want to make a tangible plan so that we're going to increase your odds of actually doing something about it on Monday when you show back up at the office to hopefully, bring something back that perhaps inspired you today.
So we know that trust is built in drops, but oftentimes it get lost in the bucket. And so it's almost like a tub of water and you put one drop in there and you can't see that particular drop because it blends in with everything else. And so we know that we have to understand with our teams and with the public, it can feel like everything is leaking out of the bucket as it's filling in, or there's an overflow of things, meaning we don't always have the money, we don't always have the people, we don't always have the resources. And so we have to understand those things, but we can't control those things, right? But I want you to do us a favor. Take a minute, look at your neighbor, and I want you to ask this question. What two things that affect public trust and confidence that you have little or no control over? What two things that impact public trust that you have little or no control over?
The idea behind this question is we know you've been thinking it.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'd love to build public trust, but
I can't control this, or I can't control that. And so anybody brave enough to shout something out?
Think of some things and then, we'll take some shout out answers.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court,
The Supreme Court.
says an anonymous person in the audience. What else?
The previous experience, we can't control that. That's a perfect example. Anybody else? I'll take one more. New legislation. That's a great one. And so as we start thinking about these things, thank you. You deserve a T-shirt for that. While we can't control how much water is in the bucket, how people show up, and they can show up through our doors in many different fashions. Even our employees or coworkers that we work with, the team can show up so many different ways. It helps us to repair the bucket, though. When we think about that, it helps us to evaluate, and as somebody said earlier, imagine or reimagine how we can do things better, how we can do things different. What was our future impact? And me and Brian were talking earlier about the transition of our age from when we grew up and listening to the radio and recording things on a cassette tape to a Discman to now you got cars that don't even have cassette tapes or CD players in them. How the progression of things happen, and it doesn't seem like it's a big change, right? Or big transition, but over time we move, right? And sometimes we don't even notice it. And like Emily said a minute ago, how do we turn these things into tangible responses, not just in conversation here, but when we show back up on Monday? I've been losing 20 pounds for the last 3 years. And it seemed like 20 comes and finds a way to wait for the 20 to move so they can take the place of the 20 that I said I was gonna lose. But it's one of those things where we have to put things in place to support what we say we want. And this is a part of doing that. And one thing that I've learned in writing the vision down is not for you. Writing your vision down is not for you because you know the vision. Writing your vision down on paper helps you make it portable because you're taking the notions out of your head and putting them in writing that you can share with somebody else. That's what creates legacy. And how do we do things? Because in government, we've learned this is just how we do it. And if you don't like it, you can find another job, right? But those things don't work in this space that we're in right now. People want to know why, right? They want to understand the why. And if it doesn't make sense to them, it doesn't fit their narrative. And so when we talk about writing it down, make it as plain as you can make it. because you're trying to help people understand that. And so understanding the drips are important, but it helps us do more than just talk about it. It helps us refine it and make it better.
Thank you. And what I love about the bucket metaphor is that it may be a leaky bucket, right? There are these things beyond your control that may be influencing what's spilling out of it. But that doesn't mean that you don't have control over what's going in. And it might be that added motivation to say, let's make sure that bucket is sufficiently full, because something might come splashing into it that we lose a big amount of it. And unlike a tangible bucket, though, there is no set or finite size of how much public trust and confidence is possible in our communities. And I notice this when I work with jurisdictions. I'm very lucky because the people I get to work with, like Mankinta and like many folks in the audience, shout out to the Fireside Chat this afternoon. You can come hear more about one of our Fairness Challenge pilot project. What I love about working with folks is that they may come in with really high performing practices and really high levels of public trust and confidence. And so getting from like an A- to an A might just feel like, oh, how are we going to move that needle? But again, it's not finite, right? There are always ways that you can enhance. And it might surprise that court user who comes in. Maybe they just moved to your town from some other city, and they have a very low perception of the type of treatment they're going to get in court. And they're delighted, right? We see, and it's perhaps surprising, but people can really be so pleasantly surprised at the experiences that they get in court. And it doesn't undo that past experience, but it starts to shift something for them of what is possible. So let's move back towards these worksheets, because I want to get us moving to some more specific planning. So go ahead and turn the worksheet over. And on the back, you'll see all 4 of the elements we've talked about. And just a quick footnote, if any procedural justice scholars in the room are saying, I thought there were 5 elements, or I thought the 4th element was trustworthy motives. There are different thoughts on what the top elements of procedural justice are. And I've had many a discussion about this, and I'd love to chat with anybody offline about it. I find that these 4 are sort of the most actionable, especially by this audience, especially by judges. So these are the 4 that I go to. And so among these, I have a sampling of some specific things that someone could say to deliver on that element. It's not that these are the only things that you could say, but just as a way to illustrate. And what I love about something Mankinta already shared, this very top one. What's the top one? Can somebody just yell it out? What's the top one under respect? Good morning. So greeting someone, whether it's the morning, the afternoon, hi, how are you doing today? That is an evidence-based practice that shows up in countless fields.
Yes.
Teachers that greet their students individually at the beginning of the day have better outcomes than teachers who don't. So again, not rocket science, right? Not rocket science. It's actually quite simple. Is that hard to do? Maybe. You're busy, right? You're running around a mile a minute. You're putting out this fire. I can only imagine. But it's a tangible practice that I've worked with many people who might think that they do that, right? That's sort of consistent with their value of showing respect to people. When you really start focusing on it, like, ooh, I don't really do that every time.
Yeah.
Like I might do that the first person I see, but then I'm, in the sort of frenzy of the day and I might forget. So we have here just some examples of micro practices that align with each element that we're going to use as we start to kind of map out what this could look like.
And so we're talking about ideas of how this micro practice looks in these tiny drops. When you think about those, what are some of the ways that respect shows up in the public? Can you shout out like a couple things that you think of how it shows up and how we create those intentional drops? Emily mentioned saying hello. Are there any other things that you have done or you have seen or that you can think of that may help support creating those drops? Because we can be intentional about what goes into our buckets and what are some things that we can do to create that space.
Who's got a micro practice for showing respect to your teammates or to members of the public? Body language.
Body language.
Yeah, like what?
Awesome.
How about this? No, not that, right? If I'd been standing up here this whole time doing this, you would make some assumptions about me and my interest in being here.
Yeah. Somebody had something.
Good one.
Perfect example.
Calling people by, and we'll just repeat what people say just for the benefit of the recording or live
calling
stream.
calling them by their name is a great way to do that. Okay. 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 Random temperature checks, checking on the team and seeing how they're doing is a great way to do that. I try to do that every morning, and when I don't do it, people remind me that you can come and say good morning to me. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Thank you for saying to me that that's important to you. And so I'll be very mindful of that. So those are great points. And just think about it. We're talking about these drops, but you're doing it already. And so how do you grow that into the organization and make that something that everybody understands is relevant and important? One thing that I've learned in this work is we all show up with two things to a situation as leaders. We show up with water or we show up with gasoline, right? And when you hear the word gasoline, I heard the ooh. But gasoline is important when it's necessary. If somebody is doing the things that we want to create the right drops, gasoline is great because you want that fire to expand, right? There are times when I show up and water is needed when things aren't working the way that we think they should to create this fair space. I want to put water on that immediately because I want to put that out. And so we show up in two places, and learning when to use gas and when to use water is relevant in how we move the narrative. It controls our drops, right? It controls the type of drops that we go in the bucket. And sometimes we have to put a lid on the bucket because we don't want stuff to go in there. It's full, right? And that means we got to be a little bit creative. That means we may need to look at a new bucket and expanding that bucket and how it collects information. And so those things are things that I think will help support us in making sure those micro practices grow to what we want them to grow to.
So this is where it gets really tangible. So some of you may be thinking, how could saying good morning possibly be a measurable improvement or produce a measurable improvement? And what I would say to you is try it. Try it, right? Because the only way that we start to advance this, or I think the easiest way, is with those tiny things. So flip the paper back over. The section 3 at the bottom is where I hope you will be able to come with at least 3 practices today before this session is done. We have 22 minutes left. 3 practices, and there is nothing too tiny. So it could be using the word team instead of staff because that shows respect. It could be once in the month of August, you are going to do a temp check day, right? In a way, the tinier the better because it's going to increase the odds that you actually do it and then are likely to maybe try it again, right? If it's hard, you'll probably come up with reasons that something else takes its place, right? At least that's how these things go for me sometimes.
I agree with that.
So see if we're gonna just be quiet for a moment. See if one of the things that were already mentioned for respect, or maybe something you noticed from those list of practices or kind of phrases on the other side of the worksheet. See if you can name at least one practice so far that is something that you could do. So introducing this idea of sort of a me plan. You don't need anybody's permission. You don't have to change the employee handbook. right? What is something that just you could show up on Monday and do a little bit differently? See if you can name at least one. We'll give you a moment of quiet to see if you can. Okay, and this is where cheating is allowed. So if you didn't get one, turn to your neighbor and say, "What'd you get?" Maybe they can give you an idea. Okay, we're going to move on. We will save time for some questions, so we'll keep things moving. But this is a practice that you could pause and do with yourself or on, as a team whenever you want, right? Doesn't require any fancy software. It doesn't require some, advanced training. It's just slowing down, looking at the 4 elements. What is something that I can work on today that advances one of these? And so those are just things that you on your own can do. No assistance required.
Correct. So when we start thinking about these takeaways and what we have to do to move the needle forward, if I improve me, right, I automatically improve the team. And so when you create little things that you can do and you start doing them, they'll notice the difference. And some people say, "Oh, you look different today." I might say, "I lost those 20 pounds, but I did." Right? But what I've done is I've created some tangible things. And so we want to talk about these takeaways. We need strategies that target our goal of fairness. Like if we're trying to be fair, how do we do it? Right? What do I need to aim for to make that look like I want it to look? We had to understand, as Emily talked about earlier, there are sciences and research around this work. And so somebody has evaluated this to make sure that we're just not talking and making stuff up. Because I know we'll sit in a space and we'll say, that don't fit my space. Try it. As my grandmother would say, try it, you might like it. And there are times where I try things and I'm like, oh, that doesn't taste the way I thought it would taste, because I didn't know what it tastes like until I tried it. So try some things that you haven't tried before, and maybe you'll get some results you haven't gotten before. Another thing is the framework is the same for internal and external trust. People are people at the end of the day. People want to be heard. People want to be respected. People want to feel like they have a voice. People want you to treat them and be neutral and impartial to how you make decisions. People want to be included. Those things matter. And if you do those things, I think sometimes people would do work without compensation because they showed up to serve people just like you did. And sometimes we forget that in the work that we do. And the fourth thing is these strategies generates compliance and cooperation. If you do the work the right way, you'll get the results that you're trying to get. And every now and then, you should evaluate that. And when you start thinking about those things, you start thinking about how it's working, because everybody wants to know, is it really making a difference? And my wife used to work in the field of substance abuse and addiction, and I learned from her how to measure progress. Because if you're dealing with something, relapses doesn't mean you haven't moved forward, right? And sometimes we'll stop doing it because of one relapse. And that means we need to evaluate, what do we miss it, or did we really do it the right way or the way it was intended to get the outcome we want? Because like Emily said, if I don't put the right amount of sugar in the batter, I can change and alter the taste unintentionally. Skipping steps changes the outcome. And so when we start thinking about these things, we think about that. And so one thing that I'll learn and I'll share, and I'm on time, trying to make sure that I'm on time because Emily looks at me. But anyway, one thing that I learned, if you forget your why, you'll forget your way. If you don't take anything else, if you forget your why, you'll forget your way. And we put so many things in front of our why that we can't even see it anymore. And that makes the work hard. People are difficult, people are different, they're all those things. But you know that already. So you're not surprised by people showing up the way they show up, but you're the professional. You're the expert. And when you understand your why and when you value your why, your way becomes so much smoother and it becomes so much clearer. And so thinking about that and how these things work, better practices, improve outcomes, fewer incidents, fewer complaints, lower stress levels, greater cooperation, reducing FTAs, oh my God, is one of the greatest things and greatest challenges that I've ever tried to figure out. How do you get people to just show up? And we understand once you build trust with the community, they want to. Because they come in thinking they're gonna be respected. They come in thinking they're gonna be heard. They come in thinking you're gonna be neutral. They come in thinking that you're gonna be supportive. And so those things create what we want, but we gotta do the work and build the processes one little micro step at a time. And when we do that, we get what we need from people.
Thanks, Mankinta. So hopefully you all were able to write down at least one kind of individual practice, like a me practice that you can do without needing permission. There's also we practices, right? Things that start to look more like team efforts or policy or whatnot. And of course, those are also really powerful. They might take a little bit more time. They certainly involve coordination, either within your team or maybe even other stakeholders. But these would be things like that don't necessarily have to be that much harder, right? What if you had a standing agenda item to look at how the 4 elements could be enhanced with some new program you're rolling out? All right, I heard a lot chatting in the hotel lobby about being creative about how things are docketed. I know Mankinta's been navigating in his new jurisdiction. They've got how many?
54 dockets.
54 30-minute dockets is one way to do it, right? We heard another court that's kind of shifting from one method to another. It's all experimentation. What if even in that, what does that have to do with procedural justice? Is there a way to pack that rollout with these 4 elements? Probably you can come up with at least one, right? But maybe you can actually find a way to hit all 4 of them, right? Is there a way to give voice to the team as you roll that out? Is there a way to give voice to the public as you're shifting it? I don't know. But having a standing agenda item that's the reminder piece that we're going to get to in a minute. Your brains are busy, I have no doubt. So we want to, again, give it a chance to deliver on what your plan is. So having it just go right in the meeting agenda template, the conversation template, means you don't have to remember it. It's just already there. Thinking of ways to measure it. Litigant feedback, I could talk a whole 75 minutes on litigant feedback, is really the gold standard. Does the public trust us? Do they think we're fair? You got to ask them. And we've learned a lot about how to do that. I think that's less daunting now than maybe 5 years ago, even, given various tools. Think about how these elements can show up in internal procedures, right? Think about all the internal processes that you spend so much time on. How could these 4 elements be put to work to be generating cooperation even in simple things like, like the temperature checks, like less simple things like performance review. But really all of the key functions of your job, how might these actually become part of that architecture? And then last but not least is how can you build community a community of practice, so that this starts to become a common language. I've been talking on this topic for a while, and at the beginning, 10, 15 years ago, not that many people had heard of procedural justice. Now, I think it's a more common, household name, and yet still, it's not very common, or you think you know what it means, you don't. Build it into the vocabulary, right? You don't have to use the phrase, but use those elements. At least kind of foreground those 4 core elements in what you're doing, and that helps to just build this common understanding, I think, so that it's easier for it to show up. So we're going to wrap up. We have about 10 minutes left for questions, but I did want to give a shout out as part of that Fairness Challenge project that I mentioned. There is free training coming up. There's lots of tools available on this. I guess I should start with that. The National Center has a 1-hour online procedural fairness course. It's free. Another colleague, friend of mine, a court administrator in Ohio, she and I put it together maybe 5 years ago. So that's out there, right? You can have your staff do that. So all the teammates you wish could have come to this, sign them up for that. But we also have this, what we call a fairness challenge. So the idea is, again, this sort of micro improvements. It's a different way of learning. How can we take a little knowledge back to our day-to-day, work with it, and then come back together for more. So we've been doing the Fairness Challenge. I think this is the 4th year that we're doing it. So it's a brief period where you basically are just asked to do a little bit of 5 to 10 minutes of training each day, and then you kind of go back to work and give it a try. So feel free to contact me or sign up on the website to get information about that, to register. Again, it's free, open to everybody. We'd love to see your courts participating. So I think Mankinta already recapped our 4 main takeaways and kind of some of the things that we can come to expect. My guess is that some of these improved outcomes were things that showed up when we asked you to brainstorm, right? What might be some of the benefits of this? What would it look like if people were more compliant, right? They'd come to court, right? Or maybe we have fewer incidents in the courthouse we have to deal with because things are just a little smoother, right? I'm sure you all know the courtrooms that just magically have fewer incidents than other courtrooms. And it's because probably that these elements of procedural justice are showing up in the practice there by the court professionals working there. So with that, we will stop talking and invite any questions from the audience. We're really eager to hear maybe how this is already showing up in your work or questions about how it might. So thank you. And I see at least 2 microphones out there. So thank you, guys. They'll come over and can assist with any questions. I see one up here, right here in the kind of middle of the room. There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we talked about how you collect the drops of trust in a bucket, but it's so easy for the bucket to flip over, and then you lose a ton of trust.
Yeah.
So what's the damage control techniques? What do you suggest?
Also, Mankinta probably has real practical strategies for you. I'll just say conceptually, sticking with our bucket metaphor, is that the idea, hopefully the whole bucket doesn't empty, right? I mean, you can almost think of it as maybe like a bank account. That analogy was used in a lot of police trainings with procedural justice, right? Think of beat cops. They are constantly having to make withdrawals from public trust, right? In doing a raid or doing, when making arrests, there are things that are just inherently have negative components to them. And so the idea is that you want to amass as much trust as you can so that when you make that withdrawal, you actually have something to draw from. And so while it may feel as though there are certain events that, dump the whole bucket out, I guess I would say that I would hope that if people have experienced over time seeing those drops go in, it might make it an easier process to refill it after that, right? The drops kind of go back in maybe a little bit more quickly. So I'll just say that conceptually with the luxury of not walking in your shoes. So Mankinta, what's the real answer?
The real answer is honesty. Own the miss. When you kick the bucket over and water comes out, own it. I think we do a lot of damage control trying to fix the narrative. Just tell people the truth. Listen, we missed it. I'm so sorry. That's not our standard. That's not what we're trying to create. And we value you telling us that so we can get better and we can grow. And so as you move forward and just making those contacts with people and being honest and transparent about where you don't know and what you do know, I'm the first person to tell the team member who comes and asks one of those questions because they're trying to see whether or not you're an expert in the space. And I say, I don't know, but let's find out together. I'm gonna do a little research, you do a little research, and we'll figure out what works for us. Because as a leader, my job isn't to know everything, but my job is to be honest about everything. And so when I do that, it creates the relationship that matters because we don't trust government because we think they hide stuff from us. And so if I kick the bucket over, I'll act like it didn't spill over and there's water on the floor. Oh, my goodness, we wasted something or we did something to you that's not appropriate. And we appreciate this being a way for us to get better. We don't want these things to happen because we want to reduce them. But when they do happen, we're not going to ignore them. We're going to acknowledge them and we're going to move forward together. And that's what's helped me in the work that I've been doing.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Everybody still trying to get over dancing last night? Yeah.
Oh, we have a hand in the back there.
I do have video from last night too.
Oh,
I was a guy in the back doing that right there.
Emily, will the slides be available?
Yes, slides will be available.
All right, we have a kind of a funny question. Under your elements of voice, one of your micro practices was, I may need to interrupt you in a few minutes. Could you give us an example of like how you would start off with that and like what situation you would use it?
Yeah, it's a good one. And again, I'm sure Mankinta has things to add on this. So one of the things that I hear so frequently on the element of voice is from professionals is fear. Because there's this perception that if we invite voice, it's going to be like opening the floodgates. And now we're going to have to sit and listen to people say all kinds of extraneous things about what brought them to court that day and the experience they had with the police officer and all these things that maybe then you'll be worried that you might have water spilling out of the bucket now getting them to be quiet. And so I think what's really key to that voice element is make a plan for when you're going to need to cut off the voice too, or reroute the voice. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if you have a plan of how to do that respectfully, it's probably going to go a lot better than waiting until you're flustered and frustrated and be like, okay, that's enough. I don't need to know any of that, right? All I really need to know is how to spell your last name or whatever is the issue. So I wanted to include something on here about making a plan to interrupt someone. So let's say you have a team member, whose job is to do some sort of intake, right? Or they're trying to, reschedule somebody for court, or they're talking to a prospective juror about, I don't know, how they can get out, how they, are trying to get out of coming, or whatever it is. We do encourage asking open-ended questions of your staff. And so pairing that, though, with something that sounds like a plan of how you're going to interrupt them. So it might just be, I'd like to hear more about what your concerns are with that. I want to let you know that I may need to interrupt you at some point, either to ask a clarifying question or to move on to the next topic. So I just want to warn you about that in advance. But go ahead, please tell me, what concerns you have about coming in for jury duty. So it may feel awkward. All of these can be tailored, but it was just sort of a reminder that it's okay to make a plan that you're going to need to interrupt someone. This doesn't have to be a free-for-all that then, it feels like an inhibitor to inviting voice in the first place. Great question. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I watched this older salesman teach on give them the pickle. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I can't even think of it. YouTube, give me the pickle, customer service video. I'm sure you can pull up this older guy. And he says the customer is not always right, but they're always the customer, right? And to add to what Emily said, the way I've handled that in my career is setting the stage of what the expectations are, what we can do, and sometimes extending the conversation to another time. Hey, listen, I know you have a lot that you want to unpack, and in this moment, we can't get all of it out today, but we'll make sure we create intentional space going forward to hear everything that you have to say. If you could write it down, we have these cards throughout the courthouse that you can fill out and submit them in anonymously. And we collect them and we reach out to people based on what the comments are. The other piece to that is, like I tell team members, what kind of meeting do you need or what kind of conversation do you need from me? And they'll say, I need a quick second. Well, I'm walking. If it's okay with you, you can walk with me and we can talk about it, right? I didn't tell them no, right? And I still had to meet my obligation. And some people said, well, I'll come back. Okay, well, let's make sure you come back. Or I'll follow up with you when I get back from the meeting. And then I come back and I follow up. But just making sure that you're doing the things to ensure that they understand that what they have to say is more important than all the other things that you're doing in that moment. And when you make people feel like that, it changes the outcome of what you're dealing with. And sometimes in initial places, you're gonna let people throw up. And it's okay, because the more you create the space, the more refined the conversation becomes. And the extra stuff is left out. Because when they haven't talked ever, they're gonna bring everything that they've been peeping in their pocket, in the cigarette boxes, under the mattress. They're gonna come with every single thing. But the more you create those spaces and be intentional about those spaces, you narrow those conversations down to specific things, and then you can move forward what you really need to work on and what you need to focus on.
Thanks, Kinta. So I know we're out time, and I will just add that if you are the kind of person that's probably going to lose track of this paper, this very brightly colored paper, but by the time you get home, there is deliberately a reminder section. Put it in your phone, write a note to yourself on something else that you know you'll have with you. The reminder step is really key. We need the intention to do this work. We need tangible micro practices, and you also need that reminder piece. So good luck. I'm eager to hear from all of you. Reach out if you have practices to share. And thank you, Kinta, so much for joining me today.
We'll take our photo.
The what?
You gotta take our selfie.
That takes our right? Oh, yeah, let's take our selfie. Let's do it right now.